I think the only step which is common to all certified projects is, of course, the final verification through the certifier.
So I have to ask you about refurbishments because it's one of my favorite topics.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. You can also check out our Reimagined Buildings YouTube channel for some great inspiration for both building new or renovating. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast.
Welcome back to the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you this week from Adelaide. And with us we have Mary and Ilka, as well as Zach. Mary, how are you doing?
I'm great. California is amazingly lovely, especially compared to the rest of the country.
And you're in the middle of a renovation at your place at the moment?
Well, I'm doing fire hardening measures to increase our resistance to wildfire. So we're boxing in the eaves around our house, which are so helpful in providing shade, but they're wood, and so more likely to catch fire if an ember came swirling around it.
Sounds like something we should talk more about at some point, how to fireproof our houses, which is unfortunately becoming more necessary in your part of the world and others as well. Ilka, you're fresh back from a trip to Europe?
Yeah, I just came back from Ireland, and I'm getting used to the heat again here in Philadelphia. I'm sitting here sweating. It's about 96 degrees, and I got really used to the around 60 degrees in Ireland with lots of rain and a lot of wind all the time. So you can't, first day being there, I learned that you can never, ever leave your house without a rain jacket.
Right. And you saw a few passive houses in Ireland?
Yeah, I did. It was really, really interesting. And it was just nice to connect to people that do the same things that we're trying to do here.
Yeah, some great activity going on in that part of the world. So keen to hear more about that. How's things in Seattle, Zach?
Oh, they're great. Similar to what Mary said. We're several hundred miles north, but on the West Coast, it's quite nice.
Got a great interview from Mary and Ilka this week, covering some projects that people will probably be familiar with, because the interviewee, your guest, is very experienced and worked on some pretty significant buildings. So looking forward to getting to that. But before we do, Zach, we've got some people to thank.
Yeah, a big thank you to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxt Ingui Architects, Glavel, Minitaire, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Rockwell North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. Thanks to our champion sponsors, Bewizo, Gradient, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, PH Air Seal, Proseco, and Source 2050. And a big shout out to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority.
Great. All right. Now, Raphael is very experienced, as I mentioned, done a lot of work in Passive House as a certifier, among other things. Mary, Ilka, he introduces himself during the interview, but you want to give us a quick background as to how this came about?
Well, I was speaking with him for the article I wrote about the first Passive House certified hospital in Frankfurt, Germany. And he was the consultant on that project. So I said, wow, there's so much to talk about with you. Let's do a podcast.
Awesome. All right. Well, there is a lot to talk about, so let's get straight into it.
Today we have with us Raphaël Vibert from Herz Lang. Raphael is a senior project manager.
Herz Lang is based in Bavaria, and we are at the border with Switzerland, Austria, so the very south of Germany.
And can you tell us a little bit about how you came to be working for Herz Lang and when you got started there?
Yes, of course. I started for 12 years by Herz Lang, and I studied before engineering in France, and I was searching for a more practical final project to complete my master degree. And I wanted to, since a long time, to bring the energy transition forward, but I only knew that energy efficiency was a good point to start with. And after some working experience in Scandinavia, I have seen, or I have realized, that the German market was most ahead concerning the energy efficiency in the building sector. And at that point, I was very lucky that Dieter and Florian, the CEOs from Herz Lang, were so cosmopolitan and willing to dare the challenge with a French guy.
So nice of them, huh? So can you tell us a little bit more about what Herz Lang does?
Yes, so this is a company, a design office working on highly energy efficient buildings. We do it at every scale and worldwide, but we have two big sections. The one focusing on local, a bit smaller projects. We do from A, B, Z, so all the scope of services. And the part, this is the part where I am involved, and we bring the passive house knowledge on far bigger projects, and we are here only responsible or only in charge of the energy efficiency part and building physics in general.
So can you tell us specifically what your role at Herz Lang is? What does the senior project manager entail there?
Yes, so I'm in charge of passive house projects at 99% of the time as a designer and as a certifier. And I provide related, so passive house related consultancy services on a broad scope of items, actually, from hygrothermal behavior of the envelope, for example, to the evaluation of ventilation systems or control strategies and so on. And sometimes when we cannot make an assessment with more simple solutions, also carry out a bit of dynamic building simulation. But this is.
And how did you become interested in passive house in the first place? Like specifically passive house, not just overall energy efficiency?
Mm-hmm. Actually, it was a bit after that time in Scandinavia. I have heard for the first time about passive house, the passive house concept, and it was clear that in order for the energy transition to succeed, we need energy efficiency, yes, but also in a user-friendly manner. And this is exactly what the passive house provides. This is this very high energy efficiency, and but also on the other side, the highest possible comfort for the users. You cannot forget the users in that process. And the passive house concept had already at that time been proven and tested on many buildings worldwide. So it was like the level, the proved concept. And I think this is, I see currently worldwide many tries to reinvent the wheel, and I feel it's not needed here. And I think I also love the passive house approach with optimizing the envelope long term before focusing on mechanical systems and so on. This is, I think, the main difference currently on the French market, on the German market, between code and passive house.
I'm sorry, the main differences with the mechanical systems, did you say?
No, I mean a quick, easy pathway is always to say, just invest in a heat pump and it's solved. You did your energy transition, and change the windows and put some insulation on the building, and everything is fine. You know what I mean. And the passive house focuses first very deeply on the envelope. You have to optimize that first, and afterwards the money to spend on the mechanical side is very reduced, and you have far more room for possible systems for to optimize the efficiency. And this is not the case if you don't focus on the envelope first. This is exactly the point I tried to mention with that I love it. This is the envelope is lasting sometimes even 100 years, and the mechanical systems in this period has been changed 5-6 times. And
so in a way, you're kind of telling us a little bit about what you do when you consult with projects to help them get to passive house, because of what you just explained, focusing on the envelope first, and then you get to reduce the mechanical systems. But can you tell us a little bit about your typical certification process, how you help projects actually get certified as passive house building?
I think the only step which is common to all certified projects is, of course, the final verification through the certifier. So there is, after the execution on the building site, after this execution has been completed, there is this verification, but this is only a one-step certification pass, and it should, I think, only be used by very experienced teams, because you are not able to change anything anymore at the end. So it passes through or not, and you didn't optimize anything on the building if it has not been optimized already by the passive house designer. And so this is, and in most projects we have, in most project teams we work with, the practical experience on the passive house is missing either completely or at one point or another. And so I can tell you what is typical for us in such cases, because I think this is more interesting. And this is what I have presented at the Passive House conference lately. There are several steps. The first step is actually the so-called onboarding of the certifier. It should happen as early as possible. I think the best point in time is during the schematic design phase. And there is at that point in time a certifier kickoff meeting, as it is usually called by the clients. And the clients you want actually as a client to give the certifier as much knowledge as possible on the project at that point, so that the feedback from him can be also be as prolific as possible. And I think that this phase is also very important from my point of view to bind us, Herz Lang, emotionally to the project. So we know the team, and we are not only contractually part of it, but after this first meeting with small talks and knowing the team and so on, we are also humanly part of the team. And I like that part. Otherwise, this is just a project like another, and as a certifier, you don't spend much time on it, or not as much as the other members of the team, and sometimes it's missing. This human part is missing. And the step number 2, this is during the schematic design and design development phase. We support the team with bespoke consultancy services as needed. And then I think there is the most important step, the third one. This is the preliminary verification. This is an in-depth review of the whole project, and it happens usually at the end of the design development phase. It has to happen not too early, not too late. I think this is the best point in time because there is enough information available, but you can still implement changes cost efficiently in the design. So if you do this process too early, there is no information to give feedback on. So it is a bit sterile. And I think this is a key milestone for the project, that this preliminary verification, and it shouldn't give a yes or no feedback. I hear a lot of certified buildings work so the process is a bit too much on that side. Yes, this is okay, or no, this is not okay for the passive house, and this is why we not only verify the calculations and the available documents, but we also deeply dive into the project, ask precise questions, and we make many detailed remarks and suggestions to optimize the buildings for targets, budget, and so on, and schedule, of course. This is also the point in time where we optimize, as I have mentioned before, control and regulation strategies with the project team. This is also a very important part, which is coming far too late, usually, from my perspective, from my point of view. And of course, this is a huge report at that point in time, and the passive house designer is usually a bit surprised to get so much feedback. But afterward, I think he's always happy to use it also as a base to build up his own quality management system, or however you call it. And then there is step number 4. This is at the end of the construction documentation phase. There is a new review to make sure that after sometimes many changes happen in between. So you want to make sure that everything is okay before the tendering process starts. And at that time, we also provide a so-called pre-certification letter as a confirmation for the client. And of course, the last step is the one I have mentioned at the beginning, the one which is common for every passive houses. After the completion on the building site and the testing of the airtightness, we verify all the evidences and check if the building still complies with the PHI criteria. I think at that for that part, the only difference might be here that by us, for our project, this phase is actually quite quick and smooth because the necessary tasks and documentations have already been clarified months ahead, and this is the point of it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for laying out these steps, and I really like that you included the being emotionally connected to the project in the beginning. I think that's really important, and I think you're totally right that you're saying the last step is becoming very smooth because you did all the work up front. Because if that doesn't happen, we just talked to a rater, a verifier, where if that doesn't happen, then that last step is actually quite a bit of work because all these different models and all these different calculations still have to be aligned, right? So, but in your case, if you're so involved right from the beginning, I think that smooths out everything towards the end. So
yes, and maybe to add a small thing about that, and the problem is the main problem is actually at that point in time, all engineers, all workers, they are busy with new projects and they don't want to care anymore about the last one. This is already past for them. And this is the point in time you want everything from them. So this is a bit hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. So what kind of building types have you consulted on and certified overall?
Many, I don't think I will remember all of them, but of course, there is the typical residential and office buildings. which I guess most passive house designers have probably already worked on. But thanks to the reputation of Herz Lang on the passive house space, I was able or lucky to gather also experiences on schools, on passive house museums. There were also some industrial building types and exhibition and concert building. We even had a prison. This is always a bit surprising for the people to hear about it, and some public indoor swimming pools. This is what we are doing currently with the PHI. And of course, also refurbishment. I think this is also a very important part of our experience here, and many construction types. So not only concrete, but also timber or even metal-based constructions.
So I have to ask you about refurbishments because it's one of my favorite topics. Can you just tell me about some examples when you say refurbishments? What building type are you talking about for those projects?
They are very different because this is how the definition of refurbishment. You have to deal with what's existing. But I think the main project I have in head when I say refurbishment, this is of course the certification of the Kensable Tower in Hamilton. We've completed the certification process last year, I think. And this was a huge step also for the team, for the local team, and for us. A lot of learning process and learning effect here, and also more local German projects. We always have to deal more and more with that challenge of the refurbishment, and it makes sense, of course. And the passive house is exactly the right tool to do it.
Yeah, that Kensable Tower was certainly a landmark project over here in North America. Just its size and scope of the refurbishment was, quite a learning experience for everybody here. Have you worked a lot in North America, or was that an exception?
So, by a lot, of course, we have more German projects because when we are the designers, we only work on local projects because you have to be there. You have to be very often on the building site. You have to you have meetings very often, meetings and so on. So for certifications, we are we have many projects abroad, and this is it makes sense to do it this way because as a certifier, we help local passive house designers and local teams to reach the passive house. We bring them our additional experience of sometimes very special uses, but we don't take them the job. This is more a partnership, and we like that approach, and we tried for years to get some projects ourselves, but it doesn't make sense for the reasons I have mentioned. So we are more in a partner relationship with local passive house designers to support them where they might have a lack of knowledge or of experience.
Do you work on projects in other countries throughout Europe as well? Like, do you deal with different kind of climates?
Yes. So North America is, of course, very challenging for the cold climates. For example, we have a building we support a team of the exhibition buildings or exhibition center in Winnipeg. So this is a very cold climate. This is very challenging. If you move that building to Vancouver, it looks very nice. So the heating demand drops by a factor of 5, I guess, or something. This is the differences is crazy. And of course, in other climates, this is the same kind of complete different experience and also building culture. We have projects in China. We had one project in Dubai, so we had, of course, additionally this approach, also this challenge with very different climates. But I think the most or the biggest challenge is always the different building culture and the different teams you have. This is the main part.
Right. The training of the people, the construction, and making sure that the construction is being done according to the details that have been decided, I imagine must be one of those surprising challenges in different countries that you need to deal with. Yes.
Yes, exactly. The building physics is the same. It's science, but the human part is always surprising. Yeah.
And recently, you've finished certifying another new building type for you guys, and actually for the entire world, a hospital. Can you tell us a little bit about how you first became involved in that project and when?
Yes. Of course, you see, I didn't even I forgot to mention it in the list before. I guess it was too obvious. So usually we design the building ourselves, and there is this certifier which verifies everything at the end, and that's it. So and we have our own method, and we have a functioning workflow for the typical projects. And here, in the case of the Frankfurt Hospital, it was completely different because the PHI carried out a research project on hospitals within the schematic design phase of the Frankfurt Hospital, and they defined, I think it was in 2015, the specific requirements for this pilot project. And afterward, there has been a tendering process to find a prime contractor for that hospital, and the prime contractor wanted us in its team because they had no extensive experience with the passive houses, but still had to meet the requirements. So our role was to make sure that the requirements of the PHI are met within the tight budget of the prime contractor. And it was quite challenging. Yes, and to spice it up even more, I guess the building had to be designed parallel to the execution. So they were not much time to breathe between the different phases and tasks.
And I understand that the Passive House Institute was involved in basically figuring out what the parameters are for the hospital, because that hasn't existed before. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. This is that document from 2015. This is a big list of requirements specific for that project. And of course, the goal of the PHI is long-term to define general requirements for passive house hospitals. And this was the first step from them. Yeah.
And then did they keep working with you hand in hand in order to really align everything?
In that case, not really. I think this partnership process is more present for the swimming pools we currently do with the PHI. This is exactly the same kind of approach, except that we are in charge of the whole package and we do our own PHPP calculation. But this our experience, our common experience, PHI and Herz Lang, flows into the future requirements for swimming pools a lot more than here for the hospital, I think. But I might be wrong.
So what was the most challenging on the hospital and the most different from other building types?
I think this is not that much different from other buildings, but we had to spend a lot of time solving connection details, even though we had a relatively easy type of construction, right? So it was concrete walls and ceilings, and as mentioned, the budget was very tight, and there were a lot of additional requirements, such as fire protection, for example, and I think the optimization of windows, of the ventilation system, and of the controlling strategy of sun protection, heating, cooling devices, and so on, was also very time consuming by that project. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of the kinds of details that you would deal with in many types of larger scale passive house buildings. And yet, I guess what made this more difficult is it wasn't following your optimal process, as you said. You were kind of figuring out while it was being constructed how to connect the different components, correct?
Yes. Yes, exactly. This is, I think, also what might not be expected. I think you expect us in a hospital to spend many hours on the energy efficiency of medical equipment and so on, but we actually spent a lot more, way more time on the envelope and on the mechanical equipments such as ventilation and so on than on the medical part.
Isn't the ventilation requirements like different for hospital, especially for operation or surgical rooms than, in other buildings?
They are far higher hygiene requirements for the hospital, and this was, of course, part of this challenge I mentioned with ventilation systems. We had to find devices or MVHR units being able to provide the required hygiene as well as the required energy efficiency. And within that tight budget, it was quite challenging.
So ventilation always poses losses, heat losses, correct? So if you have a really high ventilation rate, you have quite a bit of losses. How did you overcome that in your energy model?
It has been overcome with energy efficiency. So we have here, we are close to 80%. So real heat recovery rate. This is not to be compared with the values you see on manufacturers' data sheets, which manchmal exceeds 100%. So this is the real efficiency of the system, and so you only have 20% losses in the end, and but we also must say in a hospital the internal heat gains are quite high, so you compensate also on that part. In other buildings, in residential buildings, you sometimes needs even 90% heat recovery to be able to meet the passive house targets. Here, it was not. The requirement was not that high, but it was still hard to reach because of the other additional requirements, hygiene and the size and so on.
And
thank you.
One of the approaches that you also did to address because with the additional hygiene requirements, you needed a higher pressure drops through the filters in order to achieve those hygiene requirements, correct? So that was another challenge that you dealt with?
Yes, exactly. There is also this is the two-sided challenge by ventilation. This is always you want more heat recovery and you want also less electricity, and in that case less electricity consumption. And in that case we had also the challenge of the filters of the double filtering concept, and we had to make the surface of the filters bigger to be able to meet the requirements on the electricity demand side, and this was part of this whole challenge concerning the ventilation systems.
And I just want to ask you about two other things that you mentioned really briefly to elaborate on. And one is shading, and the other one is, the triple complications from having to meet specific fire requirements also. Can you just give us an example of both of those, like how you dealt with shading and something, some component where you had to deal with fire issues?
Yes, so in Europe we have external sun protection culture a lot more than in other countries. It makes sense from a sun protection perspective. They are very efficient devices, but they have to be controlled well, and this is not always the case. So there is the part. Which device is the right one for that purpose? But as I say, they are quite good when they are completely closed. But this is not always what you want as a user. And there is the part control and how you optimize it, or how you find the best compromise in between, and how do you control it in order to guarantee the summer comfort without getting increasing the heating demand during the heating period, and sometimes and there is a lot of work to do here with not only on the device part, on the product part, but also on the controlling part, because there is a double challenge here. It has a huge impact on the way the users will feel or will use the systems. Are they happy with it? Does it work well, or is it always working against what they would like to have? This is the first part, and the second part. This is that the companies or the contractors working for designing the controlling part, they come from another world. This is not a world of energy efficiency. This is a world of controlling strategies and to be on the safe side. So sun protection, this is on the safe side when it's closed, and it's closed even during the heating period. So to sum it up, this is the easiest way. You close it all the time, and then it protects the building. And of course, in their strategy, there is the user part. The user can change the position of the sun protection, and there is complex controlling strategy. But as mentioned, they are quite often they are fighting against energy efficiency, and that's our problem.
So it kind of takes quite a bit of education of the building maintenance or of the building operators, more or less. Is that something that was in your scope to really just educate on when to open the shading devices, or when to exchange filters, or all of that? Or is that something that was not in your scope?
Typically, it is within our scope of services. For the particular case of the hospital, we participated in that process, but this is a very huge team. You have the whole medical team, the client side, and it was the coordination was not done by us, and the PHI also participates in that process. This is a bigger approach than just making a workshop with the doctors and that's it. So, and there is many steps also in that communication. The new person, the new staff have also to learn these things and to be able to use their building efficiently. But I think the part before the users come into the building is, I think, the most important one, because you have to solve first those controlling strategies to be sure that the users, that they will be user-friendly in the end, and afterwards, when you have a user-friendly solution, then you can explain the user, okay, try to to not disturb the function of the sun protection when it's fine for you to have maybe some less daylight, and only if you need more daylight or you want to be able to have a direct contact view with the outside, then open it.
Well, yeah, that's a lot of education, and I certainly hope that all of your experience that you gained on this hospital will get to be put to use on other hospitals. And we could talk for a long time about everything you've learned on this project, but I want to touch on sort of what projects you're currently working on, if there's any other unusual building types coming up in the future, or have you working on more typical building types, or how is it going now that the hospital is done?
The current projects are a bit smaller, but they are not easier. As I have already quickly mentioned, I currently spend a lot of time on 2 passive house swimming pools, indoor swimming pool projects in Germany, and as a certifier, the most challenging project is currently, I think, the Coal Harbor Center in Vancouver. This is a high-rise, multi-use building in the city center, and it includes a school, a kindergarten, and apartments. So they are quite challenging projects, but also very interesting for us and for me.
So what's challenging about those?
Challenging about for the second certification, for the certification I just mentioned, this is of course the team, the culture, the team constellation, the fact also that the architectural choices have been made very early in the tendering process or in the schematic design phase. And they are not always very optimized in regard to the passive house. So there is a lot of work to do here, compromises to find, and a lot of support concerning the connections and the ventilation systems, because this is always the case, or very often the case in North America. There is a huge contradiction between code requirements in regards to the air ventilation rates, air change rates, and what the PHIs would recommend here. And you have to find also the best compromises. And most of the time, I feel like in North America, the specifications or the code is currently going more in the direction we want to be sure that there is enough fresh air for the users. But with a bit forgetting about the part, yes, but if it leads to too far to dry air in the heating period, if it leads to far higher heat losses, it doesn't make sense or always sense to do it this way. So this is quite a narrow view in the code from my perspective, and the PHI approach is here based on more experience concerning very different climates, concerning, so they are able to go further to the limits of the energy efficiency and to recommend smaller hair change rates because they know exactly what is important and what works and what not, and what doesn't.
Right, the advantages of experience.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah. So talking about different codes and communication, I'm actually curious about your project that you mentioned in Dubai. What type of project was that, and how did that work with different code requirements and communication strategies?
This is actually, it was an office building, so the use was quite clear. The code requirements, I don't remember it was a problem here. The main challenge was of course, the complete different climate. So the heating demand part is not very existing. This is more about sun protection, passive sun protection, fixed sun protection, passive cooling strategies, active cooling strategies. This is the main part of the work in such a project, and the code requirements I think except concerning the quite low temperatures they usually want to have, there is no limits or no problems fighting against the passive house concept. I don't know if it's because it's not existing already or because it just fit into the concept of the passive house. They also learned to protect themselves from too much sun, and I think the only problem is that this is done in a very inefficient manner. But the principles are there.
The climate there in Dubai is certainly outside the realm of many people's experience with such a difficult climate. But I was wondering, just sort of looking forward, do you have any thoughts about where the passive house community is heading, or just from your perspective, having worked in a range of countries and climates, do you see advantages or challenges to the passive house community going forward?
Chances, there are a lot of chances, of course. There is maybe we are a bit sad about the development of the passive house in Germany or in the German-speaking area. We see passive house exploding in other part of the world, North America, Canada, and so on. In Germany, we for 10, 15 years we wished or we hoped that it would also be included, or at least recognized as being a parallel way to the available code. This is not the case, even still not the case, and currently this is a bit the sad part. This is the current requirements are more focusing on renewable energy first, and a bit on the envelope. And this is exactly what I mentioned at the beginning. This is a pity, because you can achieve so much more if you do envelope first and then renewable energy. So I see it here with our own passive house, because we are consuming so less than, or the PV panels on the roof are enough for the electric car. If you have less efficiency, in the envelope and in the building itself, then the whole PV power you produce is then used for something else, for the heat pump and so on. And that part makes us a bit sad in Germany, and I think worldwide this is sometimes hard for us to know in which direction it goes. But I think as soon as the passive house is used more and more, and it goes in this direction, I see the development and the work done between the PHI and between us as certifier for the North American market, for example. The PHI knows it has to adapt here. It has to learn also from feedbacks from local projects, and this is sometimes a process which might take too much time, but this is an ongoing process, and it's coming. So the PHI knows that and goes in this direction. We see also the evolution between for 10 years the whole communication, or most of the communication from the PHI was done in German, and currently there is almost no German anymore, and this is all in English. So this is also a sign how it's developing.
Yeah, I actually noticed exactly what you're just talking about. I went to an event in Germany like a couple of weeks ago where someone was explaining all the incentives of home improvements, and top of the list was heat pumps and systems, and there wasn't much there for envelope improvement. So I was very disappointed to see that as well.
Yeah. This is a problem. Heat pumps are great, no question, but they could be a lot smaller if the building is built better.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your perspective. I really appreciate it. And
that was Raphaël Vibert. Fantastic interview. So much experience and knowledge there. Mary, do you want to kick off? I mean, you sort of were writing the article on the hospital. Were there any surprises from speaking, Raphael? What stood out for you?
Well, there were. I mean, the hospital was such a complicated project, but one of the things I really loved about talking about the hospital with him was that he told me that one of the biggest problems was that all the design decisions had not been made by the time construction started, which is a classic issue with any construction, right? If it slows things down, if you're trying to make decisions while the construction process is underway. And he said that was one of the bigger hurdles in the project. It wasn't the medical devices or anything hospital related, but it's something that we all know, we all say is, make all the decisions first and get the consultant in early and then have your project go underway. But it doesn't always happen that way.
No, I mean, and that was obviously quite big on that in general processes for other projects, that is very big on getting in early and forming that relationship with the design team as a certifier. And I think certainly for a lot of people starting out in Passive House, they do the course, do the training, they don't really understand the certification process. And I can understand that being very useful, but also quite unique. It's sort of like getting your examiner to come and talk to you very early on so that you're aware of what they're going to be looking at, and also to help you. They want the project to succeed. They don't want to be failing projects. So it kind of makes sense that certifier comes on board and you get them involved early. And that's an example of some of the issues that if you don't have everyone on board early, then it can be a bit of a challenge. Ilka, what about you? What stood out for you?
Yeah, I was going to say that the process definitely stood out for me as well, just the way he described it. one thing that he said, that you want to be emotionally kind of invested into the project too, which I thought that was a really nice way of phrasing it, because you want to be invested, right? Otherwise, you can't really give good advice. And that's the other thing that he said with about feedback, that he doesn't like when there's just a yes or no feedback, because that doesn't really help the project. That sure brings it a step forward and maybe through certification, but it doesn't necessarily make it better. As someone that is experienced, or who is experienced, kind of has the obligation to give advice and make it better. So I like that.
Well, I really liked his description of Passive House as user-friendly energy efficiency. I was surprised when I heard that way of describing Passive House, that I don't know that I've actually heard it said in those terms, but it's such a concise and helpful way to describe Passive House. It's not something that's about sacrifice. It's about, it's comfortable, it's easy to use, it's user friendly. So that was a great framing of what we're all up to.
Yeah. Quite a lot in there about efficiency first. Raphael didn't frame it exactly as that, but talked a lot about the importance of envelope. And as you mentioned, Mary, that was the most significant part of the hospital, not the complex systems, but getting the envelope right. And that's a key part of any building. And a little bit of frustration, I think, in the industry, the local industry in his part of the world, that there's still a big push for systems like heat pumps and also solar panels we see being pushed because they're kind of sexy, and there's a lot of focus on energy when energy efficiency is really the best energy efficiency device in the first place, which Raphael's obviously really passionate about that as a design philosophy. I'm kind of distracted a little bit by Dubai. We went from hospitals to the refurbishments and swimming pools. Swimming pools typically some of the hardest buildings to do well and to keep dry on the inside, because you're dealing with pretty much 100% humidity on the inside, and building an envelope for an indoor swimming pool that doesn't have condensation on the inside is nearly impossible. But Passive House is a potential option there. But yeah, Dubai, far out. First Passive House in that climate is pretty impressive. That's actually on the Passive House database. People want to go and check out what a Passive House in a very challenging environment looks like.
Really, he has worked on a number of first types. I mean, as you say, Dubai, very challenging climate, swimming pools, indoor swimming pools, really challenging building typology. But also, I was impressed by just the varieties: schools, museums, industrial buildings, prisons, concert building. I mean, just like the range was quite broad.
But I think it's funny.
Sorry, go Ilka.
I think it's funny that he says it doesn't seem to faze him at all. And he says the building science is just the same. The only time it gets challenging is because of the human part in these projects.
Right? Yeah, definitely. And those are challenging building types, some of those, because you have such a varied concert hall. You go from very few people to a huge number of people, and you're dealing with highly variable loads from the occupants. And also, I was really interested in that occupant operation, and you did talk about training. I think this was going back to the hospitals and teaching people how to use external shading devices, and that's challenging because people just want to do their work in the new building. They don't necessarily want to become building scientists or facility managers, yet having a little bit of knowledge in how the building operates and what the passive house features are, I can imagine would be pretty important to making it run correctly. And I can see that being a challenge to effectively train people on how to operate a building.
Well, I really appreciate, of course, when he talked about refurbishments, that he talked about, he worked on the Ken Sobel Tower, which was really a huge pioneering effort to do a retrofit on such a large building. But I love that he said, Passive House is exactly the right tool to do it. It was, he's so clear.
Yeah.
I also liked how he talked about these projects or his work abroad, that he describes it as a partnership. It's not that they are actually doing the projects, but they are helping people do the project, like professionals do the projects. So I think that's a really nice perspective and work to do.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's also useful to note that his early days in energy efficiency came from a place of being really interested in the clean energy transition. And so he's recognizing the connections between building energy efficiency and this overall move to the clean energy transition. And there's some nuance there, understanding this important role that the building envelope plays and how that can mean that these really important devices that are part of the clean energy transition, heat pumps, solar panels, those systems can be so much smaller and more resource efficient when you first address the building. So that was good to kind of, I think, highlight that, and as a reminder for all of us.
Bringing it back to that envelope first. And right at the start, he also pointed out that the envelope has a good chance of lasting much longer than a lot of those mechanical systems. So you're designing for at least 100. We should be thinking about designing for at least 100 years, where any of your systems might be replaced a few times over that period. So that's yet another reason from a embodied carbon, just general resources and cost perspective to really get that envelope correct. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Mary and Ilka. Really enjoyed that. Zach, what have we got coming up?
We have 2 more Passive House Accelerator live episodes happening in the month of July before we take the month of August off for live programming. So we'll still be doing the podcast in August, but we'll in August we'll take a break from the live show, and we'll be preparing for the fall season. The fall for us, that'll be spring for you in New Zealand and Australia. So this coming Wednesday, on Wednesday, July 19th, so that's July 20th for you in New Zealand, we'll be joined by Mark Ginsberg of Curtis & Ginsberg. He's been on the show before. He's a leading practitioner and architect in New York City. He'll be presenting Buildings of Excellence, Working for a Low Carbon Future. And it's a little bit of a survey of a number of projects, Buildings of Excellence projects, and key kind of learnings and takeaways from each one. And a nice also showcase of what's going on thanks to NYSERDA's Buildings of Excellence program in New York. And then the next week we have Oliver Stile from Praxis Resilient Buildings. He's based in Spain, and he's going to be presenting Passive House for Elderly Residents in Warm Climates, Meeting Unique Technical Challenges. We've also had Oliver on the show before. He's a really exciting practitioner, and it'll be fun to learn about elderly residences and also passive house practice in hot climates. So that is on July 26th for us here, July 27th for you in New Zealand.
Right. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mary and Ilka, for coming back on the podcast. And we'll see you back again next week on Passive House Podcast.